All right, well, I'll kick us off here. Welcome, parents that are here and anyone else joining. We're going to talk tonight about navigating the college process. I would say primarily focused on kind of sophomores, juniors, seniors, but certainly I think there's valuable information here for eighth graders, freshmen looking forward. The beginning part, I think we'll kind of go through quickly because that's a little more general information you hear at some of our other parent nights, and then get kind of into the thick of the college process. So I'm Paul Lichtenheld. I'm counselor at Crystal Lake Central, as it says there. Our contact information is up there. Anybody feel free to email me, please, if you have questions after tonight.
I'm Matt Berg. I'm a counselor at Cary Grove High School. Same thing. My email is up there. So if you want to touch base, just let me know.
And then I'm Patrick Hurley, another counselor over at Cary Grove.
All right. Okay, so we'll talk really just briefly, like I said, about the kind of initial stuff and looking towards post-secondary and why we're looking at these things. This is something we typically post every year. I know we show this in our seminar classes pretty regularly. Most grades, to be honest, and just the value of post-secondary education. I think we in seminar really at Central focus on some kind of post-secondary training or education. We don't always push college for every kid, but we're open to having that conversation. But we do kind of encourage them to look for something beyond high school. We just think that there's value beyond just a high school diploma.
This is a list of jobs that are hot in 2025. I think if you look closely, we won't go through all of them, but if you look closely, they kind of group in business, healthcare, and computer science. So if your student has an interest in those areas, that's probably a good thing. And if they don't, you may want to direct them to something along those lines because that's where the jobs will be.
So getting into college planning, I think it's always good. We have kids every year come in and say what they want to do or what they don't want to do when they're after high school. So it's nice here. We have some data from our class of 2020 throughout the district. It's fairly consistent, I would say, from year to year. You know, one thing kids say to us a lot is, I don't want to go to MCC. Nobody goes there. And that's far and away our #1 school in the district every year. The other ones have been fairly consistent for the last few years. Illinois State, University of Illinois, and Iowa State have been on there pretty regularly. Last year, as you can see there, that's Marquette as the 5th biggest school. But you can see our students go all over the country, all over the world. Vast majority of them do pursue post-secondary training of some sort, whether it's military, 4-year college, 2-year college, some kind of training program, et cetera. And then at the bottom there, you do see there is money out there to help finance college. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth.
So freshman year in seminar, and all 4 schools do have a seminar. We talk to your students about the requirements for graduation, what they need in order to get a CG diploma or a District 155 diploma. So very quickly, that is 4 years of English, 3 years of math, 2 years of science, 2 years of social science, and then 6 years of credits. They have to have a computer class, a consumer ed, and driver's ed in order to graduate. They don't need their license, but they do need to take the class, driver's ed class, in order to graduate. College admissions is a little bit more. So for English, still have to have 4 years. Math, I would recommend 4 years regardless. Even if they're an English major, seems like there's a chance they may have to take some more math. And if you take a year off of math, you all know it's tough to get back into it. So, and especially if they're going to go computer science or engineering, business, anything math related, I would strongly recommend 4 years of math. Social science, a lot of schools are going to want to see 3 years. Some will accept 2 years. so we recommend that you have 3. Science, same thing. If your student is math or STEM related interests, then I would recommend 4 years. If they're more humanities based, then 3 years is probably sufficient. And then we do recommend that students plan on taking at least 2 years of a language. This is, it's totally up to the student, totally up to the family. But a lot of schools like to see that a student has taken at least 2 years of a language. And sometimes if they take 4, there's a chance they may not have to take it at the college level. And then the remaining course credits are, totally up to the student. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
No, I'd agree. I think we did neglect to mention, by the way, if you do have questions, there's a Q&A feature at the bottom. We disabled the chat, so any questions you have, we'll be monitoring the chat and keeping an eye on that. And then our goal in this presentation is usually to be about 45-ish minutes and then leave time specifically at the end in order to answer questions primarily. But if you have them along the way, we're monitoring it, so please ask. So we can list, as you can see, there are thousands of college options or post-secondary options. And so I think just understanding some of the different categories, and we'll talk a little bit about these, especially in terms of like financing them and cost effectiveness between schools. But just it's kind of an idea of what those things are. We'll talk a little bit about community college and the different costs with MCC versus other community colleges. But just kind of having a grasp, these are some schools that we hear pretty regularly from our students that are kind of Midwest based, but obviously we have students, as we said, that go all over the country and the world.
And this, this is a college talk, so this is primarily going to be about college, and we understand that you have an interest in that. Every year I talk to the students and ask them, first question I ask is, how many of you plan on attending college post-secondary? And almost every single hand is raised. And to that point, 90% of our students do end up going either to a 2-year or a 4-year school. So we want to make sure that they understand what their options are and, how to get there if that's what they want to do. But we also don't neglect to talk to them about trades, vocational opportunities, which is booming right now because a lot of those jobs are the average age of the people that are in those vocations are 55, 60 years old. So they're retiring, and there are a lot of those types of jobs coming up. Military is also an option. Straight to work is another option. And then some students decide that they want to take a gap year. The thing I would say about a gap year is have a plan for that. Don't just, hope that that's going to be kind of your vacation before college starts, but have a plan, that you're working or you're doing some volunteer service so that you're creating a resume so that when you do apply to colleges, they can see that you did something with that time off.
Yeah, and I'll say this before I add something here. We've had a couple of questions about sharing the presentation. We're going to share this and this recording. It'll all be made available afterwards, so I can save everybody worrying about that or trying to take intensive notes here. The other one little resource I would recommend if you're looking or your student is looking at gap year, New Trier High School does a gap year fair traditionally every year. Obviously this year was a little different. They often also post some of those resources online, and those are some pretty well vetted gap year programs that I think would be more recommended as opposed to, as Mr. Burke said, just take a year off and kind of wing it. So yeah, obviously the two types of colleges, looking at 2-year colleges, for the most part, most of our students, of course, go to MCC, but there are other certainly options. Good to understand that you're looking at an associate's degree. The Illinois Articulation Initiative, I think I said, Articulation Initiative is that IAI, and that's essentially an agreement with schools in Illinois that kind of says that, our classes at MCC will be recognized at the school you attend. Those schools like MCC, Harper, ECC, they do work with your students. They have advisors similar to what we do, who help them find the four-year school they may be going on to, if that's their goal or whatever else their goal is, and make sure that they do take classes that will help them align with their major and what they plan to do after high school. You do see the tuition there, kind of an average. Obviously, Harper, non-residents, ECC, same types of things. If you're a non-resident, it's going to be a little bit more money. There are some agreements there. So if they offer a program that MCC does not offer, dental hygienist is one, I think, at like Harper, for example, you can usually get the in area tuition, or at least a reduced tuition. There's an agreement typically with schools between those. Of course, obviously room and board. Come up with your own, stay at home, or look for a place nearby. There are some community colleges that do have options for room and board, like Kirkwood in Iowa is a popular one. They have options to built-in room and board, so it doesn't just have to be at home.
Paul, I noticed we have a Q&A right now regarding the gap year program that you spoke about. Would you be able to elaborate on that, or take a look at the Q&A to be able to answer that question?
I'm not sure exactly what the question is asking. Do you guys understand that?
Did you mention New Trier?
Yeah, New Trier is the high school. New Trier, got it. Yeah, New Trier is the high school, New Trier High School nearby here. They run a fair. It's usually in January or February, I believe. And they have some good, you can find some of their materials even now online.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, and then besides the 2-year, there's the 4-year school. So those are going to be your major universities, both in-state and out-of-state, as well as private institutions. In-state tuition typically is going to be roughly $15,000 per year. That does not include room and board. And then private can go anywhere from, close to the same amount, upwards to $70,000 a year. Private is crazy. And to be honest with you, some of our state schools, the University of Illinois, is crazy money too. It's I think it's $37,000 a year now for engineering. And my guess is by the time some of your students start applying to schools, it may be, close to 40, which is a lot of money. And so some of these schools, are going to help you academically. If, your student has good grades, there's merit scholarship available. And then there are some schools that just do not have to do that. They don't have to give anybody any money. They're still going to get all the applicants they need. So, make sure if money is an issue that you're really looking at all your options. As far as admission requirements go, schools are going to want to see the student's transcript. So basically, they're looking at the classes that the student took, as well as their GPA, the rigor of the classes. They're also going to look at their standardized test scores. Now, this year and moving forward, standardized test scores have not been as important to the college admission decision. I don't know how much longer that's going to be the case, or if it's going to be the case from here on out. But standardized tests, my recommendation would be plan on taking that at least 2 times. I would also consider maybe taking both of those just to see which test your student does better on. So, we at Cary Grove and Crystal Lake South, we both offer the ACT on the national test dates. The SAT is the test that all juniors take at each of the schools. So there is the possibility that they can take both tests. And then they also look at possibly an essay, extracurricular activities that your student is involved with. And then some schools ask that letters of recommendation be added. A lot of schools don't ask for that. And if they don't, our recommendation is don't waste your time, don't waste the teacher's time.
And then if I can jump in here, Matt, a question that we just received. If a college is standardized test optional and your test score is very average, let's say 21 to 24, is your advice to include that in your college application or not? And just from my perspective, it can be very difficult. Ultimately, it's up to the family to decide whether they want to include that. I think the biggest determination is what is your student's GPA. If they have a very impressive GPA, they've worked very hard, then I would say it's usually in the benefit of the student to list the GPA and go test optional in that case. Now, we do have a slide a little bit further on that will give a little bit more clarification to this particular question.
And I think there's a follow-up here too, obviously with the GPA information. I would say, I think a lot of that has to do just as well as with the test score is what's the school and what's kind of the average admissions for them. And I think we'll touch on it a little bit when we get into Naviance. There's some tools there to kind of help you understand how your student might compare to some of the other students applying to that school. So that would be very school dependent, I think.
And then one more thing that I'd like to add for those members that we have here tonight. We don't have a slide on this right now, but I'm going to add this before sending this out for everyone. Some of the questions that you want to ask on college visits, and that more specifically is what that additional slide will touch on. But when we talk about tuition, we always recommend to families, ask the colleges that you visit, what is the average cost of attendance per year at this college. What you will find, especially at private institutions, the sticker shock is very different than the actual cost of attendance. For instance, we visited Drake University, and if I remember correctly, their tuition was somewhere in the ballpark of $45,000. But then they told us that everyone that's admitted and does a college visit gets $20,000 off of their tuition right away. So sometimes that sticker number can be vastly different than what the actual tuition cost is following a year or 4 years. So just want to add that and know that those questions will be added to our presentation for you to see.
Yeah. And financial aid can vary greatly. A lot of schools will say, 98% of our students have some form of financial aid. So that's a good question to ask. And obviously that can vary from student to student, but important to know. Okay, so going a little deeper into testing, and we've got another couple slides here on this. There's obviously the ACT and the SAT. I think one of the common myths, I think we touch on that later, is, which schools accept which? We're in a place now where pretty much every school that we're aware of accepts either one. So whatever one is maybe more advantageous to your student, or whatever one they feel more comfortable with, if they want to submit a test score, is usually acceptable for both. There have obviously, as Mr. Hurley kind of touched on, been a lot of changes with testing in the last year or so. But as you can see, kind of the broad differences between the two. We don't usually make a recommendation as to which one is better. If you have the opportunity to take both and see how you score comparatively, then I think that is the best tell. The SAT has eliminated, moving forward, we believe they did for this spring, the essay portion. The ACT still has it as an option. We haven't seen, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, the list of schools that even really look at that has shrunk dramatically, and there's very few schools. So typically my recommendation is for very few students that it affects. And does it help? That portion of the score is separate from the 1 to 36 or the scale sort of the 1600. So a different part of the score that does not factor into that number. Those are just the two websites you see there. That's if, kids come in all the time, like, how do I sign up for this? College Board is the SAT or AP. tests, and then ACT is ACT.org or ACTstudent.org. We kind of touched on this, the schools that are test optional. There's again a link there for a list. That number is growing. Mr. Berg kind of talked on it. A lot of schools shifted to test optional this past year. Some schools did it with the intention of doing it maybe long-term or trying it out for a length of time. Others did it, as a kind of a stopgap for 2021 grads. And a lot of those are at least tacking on at least another year. But that's something we would encourage you to investigate. Usually when you're doing that, you have the option to choose, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth in a minute about this, of how you work through that in an application. One other thing to know about is super scoring. For schools that take test scores, some schools will super score, Essentially what that means is you take your best areas of your tests that you've taken, whether you've taken 2 or 5, and you can take, your best reading score, your best English score, your best math score, and create what's called a super score. Which increases obviously your chances at financial aid, admission, that kind of thing.
All right, and if you are planning on testing, some parents like to get their students some extra support, some extra help if they feel like they're not scoring as high as they should, or there's a specific area that they need to enhance, whether it's English, math, science, or reading for the ACT, or English, math for the SAT. There are free help sites at both College Board, which is SAT, and ACT.org. Both of those sites have free tutoring type programs. I like SATs the best. Basically, they're using Khan Academy for that. And if your student is diligent and has good work ethic, then that's probably the best way to go because it's free. If, on the other hand, there's a specific area that they need to work on, private tutors are plenty. There are places out in business, Huntington, Sylvan, a lot of different organizations have test prep services that you could pay for. Sometimes it's pretty expensive. I know we have a list of tutors at Cary Grove that we recommend. Mr. Lichtenheld, do you have the same? Okay.
Yeah, we do the same thing. We have kind of a running list that gets shared every year.
Okay. So I guess what I would probably recommend is start with that free tutoring service. And if you find out that, like, for instance, if you have a student who scores a 26 and you know that there is scholarship money available for a student who gets a 27, then it's probably worth getting a little bit of help in order to enhance that test score. If, on the other hand, they want to go to Illinois State and they got a 25, they probably don't need any more help. 25 is going to get them in. So.
And to jump in, just to answer a quick question, when is the test that is used for National Merit Scholar? That is the PSAT NMSQT, which we give typically in October of junior year, pardon me.
So just a couple kind of terms to understand. We talked a little bit about test optional already. There's also test blind. Test blind essentially means that school doesn't look at test scores, so they really won't take your test score. That list is growing as well a bit. It's much smaller than test optional or other schools, but that is a term to understand that those are schools that will not look at test scores. So test optional means that you have the choice to submit your test score if you find it advantageous or if you think it'll be advantageous to the admissions process or financial aid process. One of the kind of caveats of the financial aid we found, especially this past year with the number of schools growing with test optional, is that they'll say they're test optional a lot of times up front, but then when you go to look at their financial aid, their financial aid or scholarship table will say if you have this GPA and this test score, you get this amount of money. A lot of schools have those tables. That's pretty common. But a lot of times if they'll say they're test optional, but then you get to the financial aid, you have to have a test score to meet some of that. So that's a thing that you'd want to investigate is, are you test optional in terms of financial aid? So will I still need to submit a test score in order to get financial aid from you? The other thing I think people ask a lot of times, like, how does this work, test optional? Usually when your student goes to apply, the school asks up front, do you want to submit your test scores? And you can say yes or no. And you can typically change your mind, especially, adding later on, if maybe they take a test after the fact or waiting results for a second test and they do better than anticipated, and that's something that might help them, usually can add that in later. Not always, it kind of depends on the school. I think that's a question worth noting up front with your admissions reps of how flexible are we in terms of changing back and forth.
All right, I know we are almost halfway through the presentation and we still got quite a ways to go. So if you have questions about NCAA eligibility, if you have a student that is thinking about competing as an athlete at the D1 or D2 level, my recommendation would be to have them touch base with their counselor and we could talk them through exactly what they need to do. But I know we could kind of get into the weeds right now, and I want to keep going with our presentation. So
yeah, and it is important. You'll see there's some courses that are not NCAA approved. We have had students who did not, let us know, got scholarship money for athletics, and found out later on they did not. They didn't meet the NCAA requirements and were not allowed to participate their freshman year. We do have a question, but I think we're gonna answer that question about scholarship money when we get to financial aid here, which obviously we're coming up right here. So financial fit, I think, is a good term to understand. Most financial aid starts with a FAFSA. As this was kind of new this year, we weren't sure if the state would maintain it, but they did. So this current senior class, the first class, was required to submit a FAFSA score in order to graduate high school. So that's one of the added steps to graduation now. There is some other options for students who are undocumented or can't file FAFSA. So, reach out to your counselor. We would strongly encourage you. But that is a way to apply for federal aid from the government, from state government and federal government. Another thing that you'll find too is there's a lot of schools that will not consider financial aid for your son or daughter until they get the FAFSA. So you might say, like, well, we're not going to qualify because we make too much money. Schools may still want to see that and may still require you to submit a FAFSA to them.
all right, so there's pros and cons, obviously, to taking out student loans. One of the pros is it starts to build credit for your child, your student, as long as they're making payments on time. The subsidized versus unsubsidized, obviously they're going to want to get the subsidized loans because the unsubsidized starts accruing interest as soon as you take out that loan. Whereas the subsidized gives you a little bit of time, I think it's 6 months after college before you have to start paying back. And then that's when the interest starts accruing. Again, FAFSA in October, probably can't repeat that enough. That is something that you're going to want to do. I know personally, I have a daughter who is a senior, and I know that, and my wife works at Prairie Ridge. I know that we probably would not qualify for a lot of student aid, but we filled that out, and we were pleasantly surprised at what Iowa State was able to do for us in ways of helping with the tuition. There are other schools that didn't do anything, but that's part of the game, figuring out which schools are going to give us something and which schools aren't, and just being aware. But first and foremost, you got to get that FAFSA turned in. Yeah, I think that's good.
I'll just add there that it does say MCC on that last slide. They do financial aid advisement for anybody, even non-MCC students, and they do a lot of night programs in the fall. I think they're great programs. If you're going to MCC, they also obviously do it for those students too, and that usually can be a little. There can be a caveat with that as well, but they will help students who know they are not going to MCC. So that's a great resource to use along with ourselves and some other that we'll talk about. So yeah, other ways to finance college, financial aid programs, 529 savings, prepaid tuition. Obviously, a lot of this takes some planning and ahead of time, so it may be a little late in some regards. Employer tuition benefits. There are a lot of companies that will help your son or daughter that if you investigate or look into, you can find. We've had students come across money they didn't anticipate and families that finding money they didn't anticipate through their employers. And then most schools will work with you on tuition payment plans. The best thing I think you can do is just talk to your financial aid office at the school you're looking at and or your admissions reps and have a conversation. They can't always create money out of thin air, but they can work with families and try to make financing burden a little easier or work with you to what will work best for you.
Mr. Ligenthal, just jumping in real quick. We do have a few questions on the chat. Just know that we will get to those questions that we're not going to answer directly here at the end of today's presentation. One question though is the FAFSA something that's sent out to the parents? No, you'll have to go to FAFSA.org and fill it out there. Just know with the FAFSA that parents have to create their own FAFSA ID and students have to create their own FAFSA ID when filling that out, and then you will merge those two accounts to each other.
And we do send out information, reminding
in today's presentation.
Yeah, we'll send out information. Our college and career people, our student services department send out information like, hey, FAFSA is open. Here's some tips, and certainly use us if we need. So talking about financial aid, there's essentially two types. There's gift aid, essentially we call it free money. And then there's self-help aid, things that you either have to work for or take out loans and pay back. They can come for a couple of different reasons. They can be for merit-based. So essentially, your grades, your extracurriculars, your test scores can earn you money. That's the merit-based. The need-based means, the school or the government sees that you need some help financing college. So that's a financial need or even non-need-based. So there's a couple of different reasons. So I think the big questions we get from kids, especially, I know I do, where do I look for scholarships? The best place that I can tell you to look for scholarships is as you're applying to schools is look at the school's scholarships that they have. Like I said before, a lot of them have tables in terms of what money they give based on your GPA or your test score. That is far and away the biggest money out there. There are little scholarships you can find out on the internet and whatnot. But the big ones come from the schools. One of the recommendations we give is not to ever pay for money. Don't pay for something. If you're paying for it, that's usually not a good sign. The second biggest thing, and we had a conversation about this today, the three of us, is there are local scholarships. They're usually posted on our websites, in our college and career centers link of our websites. Local scholarships are from areas locally. They range in terms of, you'll read some will be specifically for girls, some will be specifically for boys, some will be for, people who are bound towards a specific engineer, a specific major. So you have to kind of read through them, but they are typically common from year to year. So if you go on right now, you'll probably see some that you'll see a year from now and 2 years from now. The reason we encourage those is the applicant pool is so small. You're either competing with District 155 kids, McHenry County, sometimes just a small group even within your own school. So it just the pool is small. The money is certainly not at the level of what colleges will give you, but often ranges in the thousands of dollars.
Just very shamelessly, I will also say, because I organize with one of our other counselors, the scholarships on a local level for the Cary Grove students. In the Cary Grove, Fox River Grove area, we give out on average around $110,000 worth of scholarship aid to our students. And I know for the 3 Crystal Lake schools, it's very similar, if not more money. So cannot emphasize enough the importance of applying for those local scholarships.
And so
I would-
the boosters also give scholarship. There's a teacher's scholarship that's funded by teachers, teacher money too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. What we have done with our daughter is in January, we said, now that you are done with the application process, now it's time to do the scholarship. And her job, part of her job was to fill out a scholarship each week. And, a lot of them, she's not going to get anything, but, it just takes 1 or 2 scholarships to really make it worth all that time you put into it. All right, so these are additional resources we'll have up. If you want to take a look, these are all very credible resources, scholarship, FAFSA. Oh, I also want to mention FAFSA. McHenry County MCC will come out to CG and I think the other schools to put on a little workshop. So I think that we're going to do that again next year. But that is something that if you have a certain situation, if you're divorced and you're not sure how to do it for, a single parent, or you have, a different type of situation that you have a lot of questions about, make sure that you sign up for that MCC FAFSA night. That's a good resource.
Okay, so we've got some questions about this. So I think this kind of starts to address, I would say we get questions too about, what do my freshmen and sophomore do? There are some things that I recommend for freshmen and sophomores too. We have a document that we sometimes give out. For freshmen and sophomores, I think the best advice I can kind of generally give is focus on your grades, do well in your classes, challenge yourself without overwhelming yourself. Get involved in some extracurriculars. It doesn't have to be a huge number. We usually kind of emphasize consistency, finding a couple and really staying with them over just trying everything and trying to overwhelm or attempting to potentially overwhelming yourself. And then as freshmen and sophomores, stay engaged in the summer, find things for them to do, whether it's programs, there's colleges that run programs for high school students, certainly stay engaged in extracurriculars. Stay engaged academically, like reading, that kind of thing. And then, we'll talk about this a little bit here with the what to do junior year, but I encourage families to even do some college visits as freshmen and sophomores. They don't have to be quite as official. You could just go there for an athletic event, a theater event, an art show type of thing, but just getting them onto some campuses, I think can be beneficial early to just see. And as I think many of you know, we have just about every kind of college you could think of, public, private, middle of nowhere, middle of the city, all within like an hour of here. So I think you can just let your son or daughter kind of experience some of those early on before we get to the junior senior timeline that we'll talk about here. And it kind of gets real, I guess. So junior year, the thing that we kind of talk about, we have junior seminar. I know we talked about test prep and testing. All 4 schools run junior seminar in the spring. We do run test prep in there. That's free test prep. Like Mr. Berger kind of mentioned. But then we also kind of start to talk about these things. We research schools. Mr. Hurley will talk about Naviance in a bit. That's the tool we use the most. But we'd encourage you to start to research schools, building a list, taking, obviously, the SAT is going to happen no matter what, but also prepping for that, looking at what might be better, ACT, SAT. Attending college fairs, obviously that's a little bit different this year. In the normal times, MCC hosts one in the fall. Huntley and Barrington host them in the spring. There are plenty of virtual ones that are still going on. So if anybody needs resources with that, we can connect you to those. Obviously, they look a little different, but any school will also meet with you at any time. If you have a son or daughter that's interested and they get to meet with them, they'll want to meet with them. They have reps. It's obviously really easy to do virtually. We've all gotten kind of used to it here. So that can be an option. It says meet with reps there, like I just mentioned. That also goes through our schools. There are reps that come come to our schools every year. This year it has been all virtual. But they will come to your school if possible, or if they're in the area. If not, they might meet with you, somewhere else, or virtually, or on the phone. But we encourage students to start meeting with reps. The reps are here heavily in the fall, kind of September to November, and then again in the spring, usually February, March, till the end of the year. So those are great times to meet with them. And then Mr. Bird kind of talked about, getting ready for or applying for scholarships. I think one of the things students can do in the summer is start to get ready for scholarships by kind of prepping essays. And those same essays can be used for their applications. And then obviously as you can look at school applications open. They're usually late summer, early fall. And then again, we encourage students at that point, continue to visit schools, meet with reps, see what those schools are. Hopefully by then they've developed a list and maybe started to narrow it. And those maybe are follow-up meetings with those reps, and starting to narrow down what the things they are specifically looking for.
As far as senior year goes, at this point, hopefully your student has a pretty good idea of what schools they want to apply to. So they're going to finish their applications. And, going back to the rep visits, if your student is kind of on the bubble as to, they may or may not get into that school, their dream school, those rep visits could be the difference maker. And they call that demonstrating interest. If a student really wants to get into, let's say, Marquette, and maybe they're a point low on their ACT, and maybe their GPA is slightly below what the average is supposed to be. If that rep knows that your student really wants to go there, and that is their first choice school, there's a much better chance that they'll get admitted to Marquette if that rep can say, "Oh, I met Mary and she's awesome. She's a kid that I know if we offer her admission, she will be here on campus next fall." If, on the other hand, that college rep can't do that, then that's obviously not in their best interest. So, demonstrating interest, going to those college rep visits, going to the college nights, those are things that will help your student possibly in the admissions decision. And then very good chance that your student will be applying to these schools either directly or through Common App. Common App, just so you know, is a platform that allows students to apply one time, and then that application goes out to multiple schools. Not all colleges and universities use Common App, but more and more do. So that's something that you'll probably see. There is an essay with Common App, and that essay, usually the prompt for that is given ahead of time, and students can see what that prompt is. So that's something that they could start working on in their junior year, going into the summer before their senior year. So that's something that they can do ahead of time. Coalition is another application platform that we don't really recommend at Cary Grove. I don't know, Paul, if you do it at Central, but I would guess that the school direct application process is easier than Coalition. They'll make Coalition sound good, but it's a lot of work, and you gotta weigh the pros and cons there.
And then I'm going to jump on just for a second here. A couple more questions. Do you advise students to apply to colleges before applying for FAFSA? There really is no clear answer on that. You can apply for the FAFSA first, since that opens October 1st, and most deadlines are on or after November 1st, or you can apply to schools first. I do recommend, though, that you apply to the FAFSA in October, when you are most likely to receive any grant aid if you qualify, and then follow through with those applications for schools following that. And then, since we didn't have junior seminar this year, how can my son access the information? What I would strongly recommend is have your son meet with their counselor, set up an appointment, or with the college and career coordinators in our buildings. We'd be more than happy to sit down with your student and help him through the process so that he really understands what are the things that I need to be doing moving forward here, and where can I find the information.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of it's posted. I know for us, we did run junior seminar at Central at least. That information is posted on our Canvas pages too. So there's access different. Every school's a little different, I think, in that regards. But yeah, again, reach out to counselors, but it's usually out there. All right. Just, I think, something worth noting, there are admissions officers that do look at social media. They don't say what they do and don't, specifically all the time. It might be Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But the kind of the general feeling is that a lot of them do feel it's fair game if they want. It's, as it says, they're more common a little bit with private schools. I think the key is that the percentages are rising. Every year we've done this presentation, those numbers have gone up just a tick, but they continue to kind of increase. I would say for athletes, it's even more common if they're being recruited. You'll see that even more so, and coaches will withdraw some offers sometimes based on concerning social media posts. So just something to, I'm sure a lot of you had that conversation with your sons and daughters about be cautious, but the changes when we're talking about it for college as well.
So this is pretty detailed. I think that the two things that I would just make note of, early decision is really for those top tier schools that want you to commit. And if you apply ED, you are basically saying, I will apply nowhere else. If I'm admitted to this school, you can apply to other schools, but if you get into that school, if they admit you, you have to retract all of the other applications that you applied and go to that school. All right, so that is basically a contract that you were signing that I will go here if I'm admitted. And then you just want to make sure that your student is aware of the priority filing dates. So for example, University of Illinois, you can apply, I think it's January 1, or maybe it's December 1, but their priority filing date is November 1. And if you apply before that date, your ACT and GPA don't need to be as high. If you apply after that priority filing date, now that student's ACT and GPA probably are going to go up in order to get into that school.
Another thing to keep in mind is there are financial aid deadlines at some schools too that might differ, or might be, if they have rolling and they like kind of different times, there might be a deadline on when they will accept your application for their money. They'll still admit students after the fact, but they might not be giving out money anymore, financial aid from the school. We kind of touched, I think, on some of these, so I won't go through them all. And obviously there's kind of answers written in next to them. Patrick touched on sticker price as real. So private schools, a lot of times sticker price is not what it looks like. So keep that in mind. We don't rank students anymore. There are some schools that ask for rankings. You just have to be upfront that's a district decision. We don't do that. So keep that in mind. Essays and letters of rec, we touched on those. I think the big thing is the last one. A lot of parents ask very black and white questions. What do we do for this? Where should we go here? What are my options with this? It kind of depends on your student. It kind of depends on the school. It depends on the situation. It depends on your financial aid options. So it really, the answer for a lot of college questions or college admissions questions is it depends. So just keep that in mind, that there's not always a clear answer.
And we want to have time for you guys to hear a little bit about Naviance, so I'll let you guys go through this. The one thing I will say is, as a college counselor, especially number 7, don't overemphasize your own alma maters or preferences. That was really hard for me because the knowledge that I've gained about this process, there are certain schools that I really like. And I think I was pushing those a little harder with my daughter, and I could tell she just did not want to hear any of it. And then when she walked on Iowa State's campus, I could tell that she really enjoyed that. And, you know, I think you'll see that with your own kid, but try as best as you can. Try not to be in the driver's seat when you're going through this process with your kid. I think you'll find that it's more enjoyable if you do that.
All right, so we're going to transition just a little bit here, and we're going to talk about our post-secondary program that we use at our schools called Naviance. So Naviance is a comprehensive college and career readiness solution that helps students in schools align student strengths and interests to their goals in the future. So this is their quote directly from their website. So it's obviously very flattering, but I think we would all agree as counselors that Naviance does have some really great outcomes and offers a lot to our students and our families for that post-secondary search, whether it's college or whether we're talking about careers. So this is a pretty general guideline of how we use Naviance in the 4 years that your students are part of District 155. Each school does things slightly different, maybe in that timeline. But for the most part, your kids are going to get all of these different opportunities to explore the product and then find out a little bit more about themselves as a student and as a possible career that they might be interested in. So I'm going to go through these in a little bit more detail in just a second here. So these are some of the different programs, if you will, that Naviance offers for students. Just to touch on a few of these, good example here is the Strengths Explorer. It's a survey that students take, and then when they answer it very faithfully, what they find out is what are the strengths that they have and how can those strengths be correlated to possible careers. The MI Advantage, for instance, looks at multiple intelligences, answering those questions and then matching those intelligences to possible careers that kids might be appropriate for. The Interest Profiler, now looking at what are your interests and then matching careers to those interests. So hopefully what you're seeing here is we're offering students several different ways of looking at what are possible careers, what are possible majors that I might be interested in doing in the future. Now, outside of those surveys, there are also a number of other things that are really great about Naviance. One being Supermatch, which is a great way to look up colleges in a very specific, nuanced sort of way to look at, location, look at GPA, look at are there sororities or Greek life that you want to be in, certain academics or certain athletics that you want to have possible. So you can get very specific there. We're also a big fan of the resume function on Naviance. Basically, kids plug in what they've been doing over 4 years. It spits out a very professional looking resume for them. And can't emphasize enough just how impressive it is sometimes for students to submit resumes in college applications or in those possible careers that they're looking at. It really can set themselves apart. And then when we get to senior year, it's also how they're going to request transcripts for a lot of our schools and how we as counselors are going to send out their transcripts to those colleges that they're applying to. So really all 4 years, students are engaging in Naviance and learning more about the tool. So I know that we only have a few minutes left here and we do want to get to questions. So I'm not going to go over these particular slides. One of the reasons for that is that they're a little bit long in terms of videos. But one thing that we wanted to offer you is we don't have time right now to give you a very in-depth introduction to Naviance. But what we have done at Cary Grove and at some of our sister schools is we've created Naviance tutorials that'll walk our students through the different functionality on those various parts of the program. So when we send this out, you want to learn a little bit more about it, there's 3 videos attached. The first one's going to go into an introduction to Naviance, explaining all the different tabs and tools that are on there. The second video is going to go into the career search function. This is one that I particularly like because they can look up careers, very specific careers. Maybe I want to learn about electrical engineering, but you can also look at career clusters. So maybe I want to look at a healthcare cluster and see what are the different careers that are within that. What I really like in this tool is that students learn a lot more about careers than they thought they would have known. We all kind of know the big ones, nursing, doctors, engineers, teachers. But when we delve a little bit deeper in there, students can learn a lot more about specific nuanced careers that they might really be interested in. Something else that I like in there is it gives a pretty accurate impression as to what you are looking at needing skill-wise, as well as what are you going to be doing every day in that particular profession. And then it also shows average wages among the 50 states, since we know a lot of our students will go to school out of state, and a lot of them will stay abroad in that state and look for career opportunities. And then our third is Supermatch. This is a college search function. Again, it allows students to put in a lot of different criteria into the various fields, and it gives them then a wide variety of colleges that might fit the needs and desires that they have for that future college. We like to get our kids using this function all 4 years to really help them refine that search and understand what are the different types of colleges, small school, medium school, large school, suburban environment, city environment, that maybe they are looking for. So I know that was a very high level explanation of Naviance, but I would strongly recommend when you do get our PowerPoint from this evening, watch those tutorials, learn a little bit more about the product. And I know I speak for all of our counselors when we say we really want our parents to be part of that process with their student, with their son and daughter, as they're figuring out what do they want to do next year, whether it is going to college, taking a gap year, the military, or going straight into the workforce. We want you to be a part of that process. So learn a little bit more about that tool, maybe explore it with your student so that you both are learning a little bit more about them, about their interests, about possible careers and different colleges and opportunities that they have out there. So at this point, we have
A couple of questions there.
any
Okay.
questions. Please feel free to put those in the chat and we will be answering those for you.
So the first one we have is, can a student retake the Naviance survey tests? If they took them sophomore year and now going to be a junior or senior? Correct me if I'm wrong, guys. I don't think they can do the survey tests again, unfortunately.
There are certain ones that you can and cannot. So like the Strengths Explorer, for instance, when you take that, we cannot reset it, but something like the Interest Profiler, the MI Advantage, those are ones that the counselors can go in and we can reset those on a case-by-case basis. It does take a little bit of groundwork on our end, so we don't necessarily do that for an entire class of students, but if there's a specific student that wants that to be done, we can do that. It just takes a little bit of extra work to get there.
And then the second one there is, do parents have access to Naviance? Technically, we do not have logins for parents, unless you're a district employee like Matt. But what we would encourage is you to log in with your student. I think that helps with the conversation as well. Some of the tools, like for example, Supermatch, you can literally Google Supermatch and access that through non-Naviance platforms, which is a big, obviously, kind of what we recommended as a college search tool. But yeah, I just think that obviously we'd love for parents to have access to it, but I think it also does encourage parents and students to do some of this together.
Any other questions out there that you would like us to answer this evening?
There was the one that I didn't click it off, but the scholarships for families that have solid financial means with a student GPA. I think that just goes back to, it depends on the college, it depends on where they're applying, what they're applying for, what major, that kind of thing. And then I would certainly encourage them, those local scholarships, there are definitely some merit-based versions in those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to piggyback off of that, really can't emphasize those enough. Every year, it seems like there's a small select number of students that end up walking away with $5,000 or $10,000 strictly from our local scholarships, not even from their specific colleges. And it's really those students that are go-getters, that are filling out as many as they can. Like Mr. Berg was saying, fill out one a week. In some you won't get anything, but other ones will stick. And we tell kids every little bit does count. And that extends to those students that are looking at MCC or Harper. MCC and Harper have specific scholarships that they offer. One thing that I can tell you is we received an email from MCC this year saying, we've got all this money and nobody's applying for it. Can you encourage your students to apply for these scholarships? So even if your student is looking at a community college as a means of getting a certificate, or just doing that as a stepping stone, get an associate and move on to a four-year college, there's money out there for them to get and possibly go to MCC or Harper for net zero. So cannot emphasize that enough.
Another question, my child liked to view this. I believe, Rebecca can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's getting emailed out. I don't know that it's getting posted anywhere.
Yeah, there is the Parent University website that if you go to the district website and click under parents, there is the Parent University site. You need to give us a few days, but we will put the actual presentation, the recording of the presentation, and we will link this presentation, the presentation slides to it. So if you give us a few days, we'll get that out there for you.
Thank you.
We have
And then the last one we have so far, but we certainly can take some more if we have any. Dual credit classes more advantageous than AP classes. We could be here. We could probably debate that one for half an hour. Matt, Pat, you want to give any of your feedback on that?
I would say that it is, just because first of all, you have to take the AP test. It's no guarantee that you're going to get AP credit if you take the class. Typically they want at least a 3, 4, or 5. And those tests are no walk in the park. Dual credit, on the other hand, as long as you get a C or better, you're going to get college credit. And that's going to come from MCC. You transfer that to almost any university. They may not give you credit for the class that you took, but they'll give you college credit. And on top of that, if you take like Spanish 4 dual credit here, it is not like 3 credits. It's like, I want to say it's like 9 or 12. It's a lot. So
yeah. My daughter got 8 credit at ISU for that course.
Yeah, it ranges, but it often is more for that one. Yeah, I would generally agree for the most part. There are definitely some exceptions. Certainly there are classes that are offered dual credit that are not offered AP and vice versa. So subject matter, I think, is worth noting. And then specific examples, if you're dual credit is considered, rigorous for sure. If your student is looking at very highly selective schools, they may want to defer more towards AP credits or AP classes. They may not get the credits from those schools, but that may be a slight advantage. But you'll find some that they're just, we have AP human geography. We don't have dual credit human geography. And on the flip side, we have dual credit marketing. There's no AP marketing. So a lot of times the decision is made for you based on subject area.
Yeah.
And
That's
back after what the guys were saying there. The only other thing that I would add is really just focus on what's an appropriate amount of rigor for your particular student, and only that student can truly answer that question. But I think this is something important that all the counselors talk about. We'd like our kids to be well-balanced kids, but we'd also like them to be mentally healthy kids too. So we do see those kids that sometimes will take 5 AP classes or all AP and dual credit classes, and that can be really tough on them, especially in their senior year. So having an appropriate amount of rigor, truly, when it comes to when we talk to colleges, and we'll ask them the question, do you want to see a kid that's taking all AP classes, all honors classes, all regular classes? And they'll tell us, we want to see kids taking classes that they can succeed in. So the way that I interpret that is whether that's a regular, honors, dual credit, or AP, as long as they have balance and are successful, colleges are going to want to see that. So just another thing to add in there.
And you can always ramp up and ramp down. I think that's important to note too. You know, if you're in 4 AP classes one year, you don't have to take 4 or 5 next year. You could go down to 2, you know, especially based on what your subject area is. Find the things that you're passionate about and the things that you're good at. And it's okay to move up or down within that. It's certainly better than you know, floundering and being mentally unhealthy.
All right, well, thank you all for joining this, and thank you, Paul, Matt, and Patrick for putting this on. Hopefully the information was very helpful. And like I said, we are going to post that. And like these 3 gentlemen said, if you have more questions, you have their email addresses, so feel free to reach out to them. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.